While campaigning in Ohio, John McCain promised to break with President Bush's economic policies and limit government spending.
Now, this election comes down to how you want your hard-earned money spent. Do you want to keep it and invest it in your future, or have it taken by the most liberal person to ever run for the presidency and the Democratic leaders, the most liberal, who have been running Congress for the past 2 years, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid? You know, my friends, this is a dangerous threesome.
Joining us now, Howard Dean is chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Chairman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Nora.
Let me ask you about that specific message that John McCain is making out there. He says it's a dangerous threesome. Barack Obama, Harry Reid, and Nancy Pelosi. Should voters be concerned about Democrats controlling both the executive and the legislative branch, and that they'll engage in massive spending?
Well, actually, John McCain voted for President Bush's budgets. The truth is, Republicans engage in massive spendings and Democrats don't. We've had only one president that's balanced the budget in the last 40 years. His name was Bill Clinton. Last time I looked, he was a Democrat. So you cannot trust Republican politicians with your money. They borrow and spend and borrow and spend and borrow and spend. George Bush did it, and John McCain voted for 4 out of 5 of his budgets. The fact of the matter is, this country does better when Democrats run it. The stock market does better, and the economy does better. And it does better because Barack Obama is going to cut taxes for the 95% of Americans that didn't get a tax cut under George Bush and John McCain's plan. And that's why we're going to do better when Barack Obama is president of the United States.
But, Chairman, can you address the issue that John McCain is talking about, that essentially with no checks, as we know, about a check on the executive branch with like a Republican Congress, that there could be profligate spending, that Barack Obama, according to the Republican National Committee, has proposed $1 trillion in new spending?
Barack Obama has proposed major tax cuts to the working people who didn't get a tax cut under George Bush and John McCain's economic program. The fact of the matter is that the Republicans had a chance under George Bush for 6 years with one party running the show, and they failed miserably. I think it's time to give the other party a chance. The fact of the matter is that the Republicans don't serve as a check on anything except things like getting out of Iraq and passing a health insurance bill. The Republican minority in the Senate managed to block the Democratic majority from getting out of Iraq, from passing a health care bill for health insurance, which John McCain supported President Bush's veto of. I think it's time we maybe had one-party rule for a little while in this country so we can get America back on track and get middle-class people working again and get somebody who's in the White House who cares about middle-class and working people instead of all the people on Wall Street who got us in this mess.
Governor, you were one of the first to propose a 50-state strategy trying to widen or change the electoral landscape. We now see that the Barack Obama campaign has been able to do that, put some different states in play, in part because of his massive fundraising, just $150 million in September alone, for a total haul of some $600 million this campaign season. And yet 40% of that has been donated by people who contribute less than $200 at a time, which means there are no disclosures in terms of on FEC records. No one knows where this money is coming from. Should there be changes in how this money is reported?
It's complete nonsense that no one knows where this money is coming from. We vet those folks. They have to have, and in fact, the McCain campaign's attacked.
My apologies. The public does not know. The public does not know.
Well, but the point is that the FEC knows. And there have been a small number of donations to both the McCain campaign and the Obama campaign, which escaped the vetting process. But the vast majority of the money that's raised by both sides is from Americans who have to make their profession known and their name known and their address known and so forth and so on. We do the best we can pretty successfully to make sure that we don't get any money from people who aren't supposed to be giving it. And we turn down money from people who we think we ought not to be taking money from. And Barack has said he doesn't take money from lobbyists, which is a big difference from John McCain's campaign, which is actually run by lobbyists.
Finally, let me ask you about, we had the chairman of the Republican National Committee on here earlier this hour, and I asked him about the Republican National Committee's decision to spend $150,000 on Sarah Palin's clothes. He said that it was sexist to ask that question, and that I should also ask you about whether the Democratic National Committee has spent money on Barack Obama or Joe Biden's ties or suits. Can you address whether the Democratic Committee has spent any money on your candidate's clothing?
We have not. We don't do that, and we have not.
And what do you think then about your counterpart at the Republican National Committee spending money on that?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think the election is going to hinge on whether Sarah Palin got $150,000 clothes allowance, but it is a little unusual compared to what most Americans spend on clothes. That's not the point. The point is that the Republicans don't get it when it comes to ordinary people in this country. They have worked really hard. They deserve a tax cut. We need Barack Obama in the White House because they're certainly not going to get one from George Bush and John McCain. They have had 8 years to give middle-class people a tax break, and they haven't done it. We need real change in this country, and that's why I think Barack Obama is going to win on Tuesday.
You have a final vote tally you want to give us?
No, I think it's going to be very close.
A guess?
I think we're doing everything we can to get everybody out to vote early. We expect it to be very, very close in some of these states these big states that are at play, especially those like Ohio and Florida, where we haven't won for a while. We're working very, very hard in Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I'm actually going up to North Dakota because I think we have a shot there. But this is this is a tough race, and it's going to come right down to the end.
All right, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Howard Dean, we thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.